Hi, welcome to Gateway to Oddity. I just wanted to start this video off by telling you what it's about and giving you a little warning. So today's video is going to be about the McMartin Preschool trial. Trigger warning is that this video will mention things like satanic ritual abuse, child abuse, and some mentions of alleged animal abuse as well. So if that is a little bit heavy for you, thank you for clicking on this video, but maybe skip this one. So I don't know if you've ever heard of the Satanic Panic. So this was like the great moral panic that swept the United States in the 1980s all the way through to the late 90s. So people became really terrified that like Satanists and witches were basically like performing ritual sacrifices and satanic rituals and practices in every corner of every town in the US. It was almost like this spiritual pandemic. So what exactly does that have to do with a preschool in California? Everything. It has everything to do with a preschool in California, because in 1983 a woman called Judy Johnson reported that her young son had been sodomized by not only his father but also Ray Buckey, who was a teacher at the McMartin Preschool in Manhattan Beach. The preschool had actually been like a bit of a family affair. It was founded by Ray Buckey's grandmother, Virginia McMartin, and Ray's mum, Peggy, was like a school administrator. So Judy Johnson accused him, obviously, of sodomizing her son, but she also went on to make other accusations about the preschool. She said that people at the daycare had been sexually assaulting the children, as well as sexually assaulting animals, and that Peggy had, quote, drilled a child under the arms, and that, quote, Ray flew in the air. So the police questioned Ray about this, but it didn't actually lead to any prosecution because there was lack of evidence. But following the questioning of Ray, they actually sent a letter to over 200 parents, and I'm going to read that letter to you in full now. So they said, "Dear parent, this department is conducting a criminal investigation involving child molestation. Ray Buckey, an employee of the Virginia McMartin Preschool, was arrested September 7th, 1983 by this department. The following procedure is obviously an unpleasant one, but to protect the rights of your children, as well as the rights of the accused, this inquiry is necessary for a complete investigation. Records indicate that your child has been or is currently a student at the preschool. We are asking your assistance in this continuing investigation. Please question your child to see if he or she has been a witness to any crime or if he or she has been a victim. Our investigation indicates that possible criminal acts include oral sex, fondling of genitals, buttock or breast area, and sodomy, possibly committed under the pretense of taking the child's temperature. Also, photos may have been taken of children without their clothing. Any information from your child regarding ever having observed Ray Buckey to leave a classroom alone with a child during any nap period, or if they have ever observed Ray Buckey tie up a child, is important. Please complete the enclosed information form and return it to this department in the enclosed stamped return envelope as soon as possible. We will contact you if circumstances dictate same. We ask you to please keep this investigation strictly confidential because of the nature of the charges and the highly emotional effect it could have on our community. Please do not discuss this investigation with anyone outside of your immediate family. Do not contact or discuss the investigation with Raymond Buckey, any member of the accused defendant's family, or employees connected with the McMartin Preschool. There is no evidence to indicate that the management of Virginia McMartin's preschool had any knowledge of this situation, and no detrimental information concerning the operation of the school has been discovered during this investigation. Also, no other employee of the school is under investigation for any criminal act." So at this point in the video, I should probably mention that Judy Johnson, the initial accuser, was later hospitalised with paranoid schizophrenia, and also she died of chronic alcoholism in 1986, and that was before the subsequent trial had even reached a conclusion. So let's move on to the questioning of the children. 360 children were taken to the Children's Institute International. This was an institute that was led by Key McFarlane, and she led a lot of the interviews. The interview techniques have since been described as suggestive, and also that they invited children to pretend and to speculate about the alleged abuse. For example, asking the child the same questions again and again and again until the child responded with the correct answer. For example, there's one clip that I've seen where the child is being asked about a game that they play at school. Is that a naked game? Is that a naked game? And the child keeps saying no. And the interviewer says, well, everyone else said that it's a naked game. And she keeps on with this line of questioning until the child eventually realises that they are not going to be allowed to escape this situation until they respond in the affirmative. And eventually they do acquiesce that, yes, it was in fact a naked game. Children even began naming cultural icons such as Chuck Norris and fictional characters like He-Man as perpetrators of their abuse. Some experts have even suggested that these questioning techniques may have led to something called false memory syndrome. And what that means is that these children potentially grow up suffering the psychological effects of sexual abuse after never having been victims at all. Years later, in 2005, one of the former students stated, quote, "Never did anyone do anything to me, and I never saw them doing anything. I said a lot of things that didn't happen. I lied. Anytime I would give them an answer that they didn't like, they would ask again and again and encourage me to give them the answer they were looking for. I felt uncomfortable and a little ashamed that I was being dishonest. But at the same time, being the type of person I was, whatever my parents wanted me to do, I would do," end quote. So that just goes to show, like, these interviews were not conducted in a particularly professional way, and they weren't conducted by people who necessarily knew how to question children. And during these interviews, children even began to reveal accusations which lined up with the already emerging Satanic Panic. They made allegations about seeing witches riding on brooms. They made allegations about being in hot air balloons and travelling in hot air balloons with their abusers. And others said that they had been abused in tunnels, underground tunnels underneath the school. Investigators actually performed several excavations and they never found any evidence of any of these tunnels. They were also unable to substantiate claims that children were flushed down the toilet into underground chambers and then abused in those chambers during the period of the school day, and then taken out of the chambers, cleaned up and presented back to their parents to go home. No such chambers were ever found during these excavations. The excavations were also unable to substantiate claims of ritual animal sacrifice because no animal remains were ever found anywhere near the property. So, despite these facts that we've just discussed, this case went to trial. And not only that, it turned out to be the longest and most expensive case in US history. On March 22nd, 1984, Virginia McMartin, Peggy McMartin Buckey, Ray Buckey, Ray's sister Peggy Ann Buckey, and teachers Mary Ann Jackson, Betty Rader, and Babette Spittler were charged with 115 counts of child abuse. This was actually later expanded to 321 combined counts involving 48 children. The media reported on this case, in a way that was completely unquestioning of the narrative of the children and the parents. This further whipped up this frenzied panic of the Satanic Panic era. And people became concerned about sending their own kids to preschool across the country, believing that satanic ritual abuse and sacrifice might be happening in their own neighbourhoods. The media only fueled this suspicion and panic. So eventually, all charges were dropped against everyone except for Peggy and Ray. After 3 years of testimony, Peggy was actually cleared on all counts and even got her teaching license back. Ray was cleared on 52 of 65 counts. He was freed on bail after 5 years behind bars. However, in 1990, Ray was retried on 6 of those remaining 13 counts. But a hung jury meant that Ray was ultimately found not guilty, and he was finally free after 7 years of suspicion, 5 of which he was in jail. So what do we actually learn from all of this? I personally think that it's really important to be careful with any kind of moralistic panic. These parents only ever wanted to protect their own kids, protect other kids, protect the sanctity of their neighbourhood and the sacred innocence of childhood. But they ended up doing way more harm than good. These innocent people had their lives and their livelihoods destroyed because the McMartin Preschool, well, it was actually demolished, along with all of the joy and innocence that once existed inside its walls. I think a really interesting character in this whole situation is Judy Johnson. I think that the accusations coming from Judy Johnson wouldn't have been taken as seriously in any other time period. This all happened at a perfect storm kind of moment, because people were just getting over this idea that children should be seen and not heard, and that children should be believed about these kinds of things, which is absolutely true. But when you have somebody standing in court testifying that their preschool teacher can fly and is sacrificing and sexually abusing animals in a classroom that was never found to have any traces of blood in it, that's a problem. And I read that the prosecution actually argued that, yes, Judy Johnson is insane, but she's only insane because of the stress of this trial. And yet she was still allowed to testify, and that testimony was absolutely vital evidence. And if she hadn't have gone to the police with these ideas, none of this ever would have happened. And I just think that's so interesting, and especially when it lines up with the whole Satanic Panic situation anyway. I think that perfect storm of circumstances led to the destruction of Ray Bucky's life, and that's a real shame. But that's just my thoughts on it, I guess. I do want to do more videos exploring the Satanic Panic, because it's such an interesting topic to me. There's the Paradise Lost murders, there's the whole Dungeons and Dragons thing, and yeah, a lot of that's really interesting, and it lines up with a lot of music culture and youth culture of the time, and it's just something that I'm really interested in. So I definitely will be covering it a bit more. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing. And I will see you in the next one.